Hey, welcome to Beta List. I've got John O'Nolan, the founder of Ghost.org. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Not too bad. So you're in Vienna, Austria now. You're an expat over there, so
Sure am.
you're getting around. But Ghost has been around for about 2 weeks now. You've raised 300K in funding on Kickstarter. You've got a lot of buzz. So tell me about sort of the Ghost story. I guess you could say, where did this all come from?
I used to work as deputy head of design for WordPress for a couple of years, which was a lot of fun. That's kind of my background, doing a lot of stuff with blogging platforms, in particular WordPress, and building WordPress blogs
Yeah.
for reasonably big companies. And I've always had sort of frustrations with using WordPress to run just a blog, not like build a big website, but just to run an actual publication. And last year, around November, I was working on a client site, and I pretty much just got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to open Photoshop and put down some of these ideas I've been thinking about, because I need to get out of this headspace and think about something different. So I made a couple of designs, and I was like, oh, this is pretty basic, but it looks okay. So I put it up in a blog post, thinking maybe a couple of thousand people will have a look at this, think it's cool, maybe it'll inspire some new direction in WordPress, which would be awesome. What actually ended up happening was a quarter of a million page views in the space of like a week or two. And the overwhelming response of people saying this needs to exist as a real thing. This is the platform we want to use. And from that point on, I kind of recognized that with that level of demand, I would be pretty crazy not to try and actually turn it into a real thing. So that's how
Here we
that
are. Yeah. So very cool. So you've got it all set up. You've launched. You've been sort of in beta. When do you guys plan on sort of going public to the world?
It's going
You've.
to be October 14th. It's in 10
Oh
days.
wow, not bad. Oh, yeah, you're
Scary.
the. I know the whole the release cycle is very quick on this. It's very impressive. But and then tell me about you. Like who's John O'Nolan? Why how did you get mixed up in all this? What's the sort of backstory on the man in charge?
um, Tough question. I mean, I'm a designer, I guess, which is slightly untraditional. Leading an open source project, but really from a design-led
Yeah.
point of view is something a little bit different to normal. And yeah, my background, I guess, is building blogs and publishing publishing platforms for people. And that's what I've been doing for years. It's what I really enjoy. Interaction design, UI design is my biggest strength, I guess. And coming up with new ideas for how to use that and implement that, and particularly in the journalism and publishing field, is what gets me out of bed in the morning. So
Bad.
I do that, and I travel around a bit, and I try and work from wherever I can find some Wi-Fi and like a huge can of Red Bull. And that's pretty much how it goes.
Not bad at all. And you've is this your first sort of project that you've that's been like I guess this is widely sort of known and successful. You've had hundreds of write ups on this all over the place. But what have you worked on anything before, or is this just sort of the first sort of initial push into the unknown? You could say.
Yes and no. I mean, I've had previous side projects or smaller businesses that I've tried to do. One of the most recent ones was a site called travel.com, which was like
Yeah.
kind of a mashable of the travel industry, which didn't succeed in the end. And a lot of the reasons behind it not succeeding were due to us not being able to manage an editorial workflow for authors and writers effectively and create a real publication schedule.
Yeah.
Um, and that was in a way actually something that led to Ghost being created. So it's kind of the silver lining of that one not really succeeding was leading us on to Ghost, which was nice. But no, I mean, I've been freelance or freelance web designer, self-employed for, I don't know, the better part of 10 years, I guess.
Okay. Not bad
Um,
at all.
but this is the first real project that's gone immediately big enough to the scale where it's now that's my full-time focus, and everything else has been put on hold.
Not bad. So, Ghost is a full time focus. How's sort of the journey been? I guess like Kickstarter and sort of raising money on Kickstarter and sort of becoming a nonprofit and really running around all those things is very non-traditional, you could say, to to sort of the norm of how a company should be raised off the ground, you could say, more or less. So what are sort of maybe the challenges that you've had with that? I mean, how was it using Kickstarter? I mean, was that sort of different? Why did you choose that instead of maybe trying to go to an institutional investor? Like, what was sort of mindset behind it? You just wanted to give it to the people right
Well,
away, right?
yeah, I mean, there's that. And the thing about investors and VCs is they're really weird. Like, usually when they give you money, they want shares of your company in return.
Of course,
Like,
yeah.
I don't know, it doesn't work for me. So,
That works.
no, I knew from the beginning that I wanted it to be non-profit, to not be driven by venture capital guys saying I want a 300% return on my investment within 3 years, and that was the philosophy from day one. So when it came time to actually figure out how to be able to get some money to work on this thing, it was a pretty natural route to explore the crowdfunding side of things. Obviously, it's been hugely successful in the last few years with similar open source projects. The most famous of which, obviously, being Diaspora.
Yeah.
Or diaspora, everyone
Whatever.
always says it
Yeah. So,
differently. So it was a pretty natural route to go down from that side of things. The Kickstarter campaign itself, hard. I'll tell you, from the inside, is a lot harder than it looks from the outside. I think there's this common perception, and myself included, prior to actually doing it, that you kind of put up this single page thing with a couple of thousand-word description and a 2-minute video, and then money rolls in and life is good. It doesn't quite work out like that.
okay.
Just keeping up with the level of demand and influx of messages and people wanting to know stuff and wanting support and feedback and everything has been probably 2 full-time jobs in itself since it started. And then dealing with the whole, like, crowdfunding is great because it's created this whole new market, a whole new industry, a whole new way of doing business. But the flip side of it is there's no laws that have caught up to how that whole thing works when a whole bunch of people give you a ton of money for something that doesn't exist and then you have to do something with it.
Yeah.
So figuring out the tax side of things and the tax implications and the accounting implications of all of that has been, I won't be shy, and complete nightmare. And Kickstarter are not particularly helpful at supporting project creators with that stuff. So they throw you into the deep end when you do well, and it's kind of up to you to figure it out from there.
Jeez. I've heard some stories about Kickstarter basically just going in, if somebody doesn't sort of fulfill the obligation, that then they actually would theoretically owe all the money that they raised back to those people. So they're yeah, you're definitely right with the whole, there's some definite issues with some policies and stuff that should probably be caught
Yeah,
up
I
with
think
them.
that's something that's going to evolve over the next couple of years, but it's a big subject, and at the moment, I think Kickstarter needs to be a lot more accountable for the
Yeah.
amount of success they're giving people. It sounds like a stupid thing to say because you should be grateful
Yeah, of course.
for getting all that, but it puts you into a pretty interesting position when you suddenly have a ton of money that's come from Kickstarter, and you have a tax dude knocking on your door going, "Where did that come from?"
Yeah.
So it's something I think is really important for the entire crowdfunding space, and something I hope the discussion and debate around actually evolves over the next months and years.
Okay. And so, what's sort of the general sort of goal for Ghost? Like, a lot of people have compared it to WordPress, to Medium, to Subtle, and Tumblr, and the list goes on and on. So,
Of course.
what are your sort of goals and aspirations for Ghost? Like, where would you like to see it, go and build to, and what's the game plan?
I mean, so the tagline has always been just a blogging platform, and that's what differentiates it from WordPress, for example, which was the kind of the original subjects when I put up the idea about it. I think some people probably misinterpret that as just a blogging platform, implying that blogging is simple or small or something just like Medium, where it's a little diary of one person. But blogging is pretty much equivalent to online publishing these days. And if you look at the rest of the world, CNN these days is effectively a blog. Mashable is definitely a blog. Look at the New Yorker, look at the Times. These are all blogs. The only difference is They are written by multiple people. They have a whole lot more traffic than anyone else, but they are effectively blogs. And the long-term goal for Ghost, what I'm really excited about, is if we can create a tool that is good enough and interesting enough and compelling enough for online publishing that it can actually push journalism in a good direction. I mean, if we could have any of those huge magazines or newspapers running on Ghost because it's that good and that much what they need in the next few years, that would be incredible.
Okay, not bad. So you've got the you've got the money, you've got the it's built, it's out. Like, what's the sort of plan for the team, and the the sort of expansion of that? Like, what did you sort of start with? I mean, it was just a couple buddies, or did you sort of say, okay, I've got 300K, let's build it by myself and see what happens?
So I'm very much a front end developer,
Yeah.
but obviously primarily a designer, and I certainly couldn't do the whole thing myself. But I had a good friend of mine who's been a friend of mine for years called Hannah Wolf, who was until recently, until we made $300,000 and got her to quit her job, was a senior developer for Moo.com,
Okay.
based in London,
Yeah.
and she's the lead developer on the project now. Heading up the entire technical side of things. And she's incredible, very, very, very good. So it's mostly been a case of her and me running the whole thing. We've been very fortunate to have a lot of extremely talented open source contributors jump on board very early.
Mm-hmm.
So we had about 20 of those for the last 4 months, helping us out here and there. The bulk of the work, probably between me and Hannah, and we've got 2 full-time employees as well now. But open source contributors have helped an unbelievable amount. And when we launch it publicly in 10 days, I think we're going to have a whole lot more contributors, which is the coolest part of open source, of course.
Not bad at all. And you're gonna launch. Everything's October 14th is the magical day. And what's the sort of business model? Like, we've discussed, like, it's open source, it's nonprofit, it's sort of the anti-startup in a way. But are you going to be focused on revenue? Are you going to sort of push for that? And also, how are you going to do it? Like, what's the sort of plan for that? Like, there's Tumblr, there's Medium, but they're all sort of free. They're freemium. They're you attach your domain and you go knock yourself out. Like, what's the so how are you guys planning on attacking it?
Yeah, I mean, there's to a certain extent there's a slight misconception that non-profit means non-revenue, and that's definitely not the case. Non-profit means we don't have shareholders, we don't take huge dividends at the end of the year, and we can't sell the company to Facebook, Google, whoever. That's not possible. We do still trade like a normal company, so we absolutely need to make money in order to employ people, in order to pay for our development costs, in order to function as a business. So being able to generate revenue is a hugely important part of how this whole thing works. The main way in which we're planning to do that is in offering a hosted service for Ghost. So it is open source software. You can download it and run it on your own servers, on your own computer. But we are going to be providing a top-of-the-line premium service to let people start up Ghost blogs in a couple of clicks. And not just for beginners or people who don't know how to code, but also as a genuinely awesome platform for people, anyone who wants to run a hosted instance of Ghost online. And that's going to be our primary source of revenue that we're targeting for. So basically, what I'm loosely referring to is sustainable open source. The more people who use the hosted platform and invest their hard-earned dollars in putting their Ghost site online with us, will directly go back into funding the development and the furtherment of the software and the platform. So create a nice little ecosystem there.
Very nice. So as long as you're not going like Wikipedia, where it's got like the little pop-up on the side, where it's like, give me $5, please, please.
Yeah, we're going to try and stay clear from that.
Very nice. So in terms of sort of the initial development of Ghost, and just what happened on you've had Kickstarter, you've done. You got all the money. What did you do after that? Like, that's the sort of thing. Like, wow. I just look at what happened. Like, what do I do now? Crap. Like, what was the sort of that's what I would do. But what are the sort of challenges that you had in getting this all set up and all moving accordingly? I mean, what's the sort of like, oh, geez, man, like, what kept you up at night? So,
Probably, I mean, I touched on it already, but probably dealing with the, oh God, how do you deal with this much money from a tax point of view is the
yeah.
thing that has kept me up at night the most. The biggest challenge in general, I guess, has been the ridiculously tight deadlines that I set, that I pretty much imposed on the whole project. Because there's too many, I think there's way too many Kickstarter projects that, you back something and then maybe 2 or 3 years later you actually get the thing.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think that really takes away from the whole experience, and it doesn't just take away from the experience with the customer, but it also, I think, it really reduces your PR, the amount of buzz you
Yeah,
have surrounding the
just the
project.
momentum.
Exactly, it
Yeah.
just tapers off. So I really wanted to get something out as quickly as possible, and then iterate on that. The largely in excess amount of funding that we got over and above our target
Hmm.
means that even post-launch, that Kickstarter funding will be helping us for years to come to make sure the project is actually getting better. And the first thing we deliver is really just that. It's the first thing. But trying to stick to that schedule and really push it out as quick as possible has kept us working 18 to 22 hours a day for 4 or 5 months.
Jeez. Okay, now I know why you need the Red Bull. So,
Yeah. No kidding.
very nice. So, the revenue and you don't plan on taking any investors or like, I thought it was extremely interesting that, you mentioned it can't be sold to Google, it can't be sold to Facebook, and of course, obviously nonprofit, it's just sort of, it has to be transferred over to another nonprofit if you ever sort of dissolve. But
Right.
why did you choose to do that? I mean, obviously, if something like, ever if Ghost ever got to the status of WordPress or something to that effect, you know that might be something that anyone would be like, oh hell yeah, let's shoot it off. But why did you go to that direction?
Well, I think there's two main reasons, and the first one is more simple if you flip it on its head, which is why would you not want to be a nonprofit?
Okay.
And usually the answer to that is because when you build something to a reasonable size, the idea of selling it to Facebook or Google for, I don't know, $1 billion seems pretty appealing, because then you win the lottery, a couple of
Yeah.
hundred times over, in effect. That's not that interesting to me. I think
Okay.
everyone at some point in their lives wants to be a millionaire or has big ambitions, big financial ambitions. For me, that doesn't do it for me. I don't need a huge amount of money to be happy. I'm happiest when I have enough money that I can live, I can travel, I can hang out with my friends and family, the people who I really like, and I can work on stuff that I really enjoy. And I think the only thing I would gain from $1 billion is a nice house, a nice car, both of which I'd probably be bored of after 6 months. And then I'd go right back to wanting to travel, hang out with my friends and family, and work on some cool
And
stuff
the
that I love.
exact same thing. Yeah.
So when you take that stuff out of the equation, you don't want to have a possibility of being a billionaire because it just doesn't seem that cool. The nonprofit route seems pretty nice, and it takes a lot of the complication out of it. Like every single person in the world who is handed a check saying $1 billion on it would have to think about it, because that's really, really hard to say no to.
This is
Um,
true.
I now have the benefit of if Zuck hands me a check with $1 billion, however many zeros that is on it, I
Yeah.
can say, I legally can't take that. I'm sorry, dude. I've got nothing to sell you. And I think that makes the decisions around software a lot purer. Like, we don't need to think about should we introduce this feature because it might make us a more interesting acquisition target for
XYZ or
insert
something. Yeah.
huge Silicon Valley player. That's not even in the equation. So it becomes, okay, what do the users want? Because the only way we will generate revenue or grow as a company and continue to be sustainable is if the users are happy. Um,
Fair enough.
and that's important to me. And the second reason that I think non-profits are very attractive is because I think the whole point of open source is to be transparent. Open source development, open source code. And I think a non-profit business model fits most clearly to that whole philosophy. I think it's weird to have an open source project where there's actually stakeholders in the background saying, but we gave you millions of dollars and now you need to do this, this, and this because Tumblr are doing that, and have an open source project move in a direction based on financial goals when
Yeah.
the whole point of it is it's open source and it has people volunteering to build it. Um, So transparency is the second biggest reason, and those are two things that I'm really passionate about. And it's what I'm loosely referring to as sustainable open source. Is that the users of the project fund the project's continued growth, and it's a self-sustaining ecosystem.
Not bad at all. That's it's a really fantastic philosophy when you sort of put it in those sort of terms, because it is, you are correct. Like, it's every sort of tech company, you name it, is focused pretty much, probably 80% of the time on, like, okay, am I attractive to investors? Can I pull
Right,
another round out of my ass? Can I,
right,
run and, go in? Can Google love me and, take me home with them?
right. And
So
when I'm 3 months from bankruptcy, will Yahoo buy me?
yeah, exactly. So
The
which
last
happens
publishing
sometimes.
platform.
Yeah, but we won't go into Marissa Mayer. But but very cool, man. Well, I wish you guys a lot of success. I can't wait to try it out in October 14th, and yeah,
Man,
we'll see you. Man. Thanks a lot. Good luck. It's been great talking to you. So.
cheers, dude.